Hey guys, welcome to an interesting video on Wild Rift. So today I'm back with a very interesting one. As you guys can see from the title, I'm going to be ranking, or live ranking in this case, like building up the rankings together with you guys live on what I think are the easiest ADCs to get pentakills on. Now, I used to do these live ranking videos towards the end of the patch and I didn't really want to kind of create gameplay content since a lot of things would change in the subsequent patch. Anyway, so I would do these live ranking videos. I haven't done it, I think, since either patch 5 point something or like since patch 6.0 or something like that. I haven't done it in quite a while is basically what I'm trying to say. So I decided to do this one. I think it'll be a pretty interesting kind of experience for us. And of course, I'm going to first start off with the ranking. I'm going to shift things around as we go along so you guys can see the final ranking at the very end and how easy I think it is to get pentakills on certain champions. We will still move things around as things go along. So I'm going to start off with the S plus tier, and off the top of my head, the easiest champion I can think of to get a pentakill on is definitely going to be Samira. And then the next like champions that I think of when I think of easy pentakills are Vayne. I think Vayne is the champion I have the most pentakills on, and Jinx. Of course, we might move these around as it goes along later on, and we'll kind of see how it kind of goes after that. So then I think I'm going to kind of go in order. Now, Ashe, I think very difficult, doesn't do very much damage, even when you're very fed. No, right. So personally, I have pentakills on every single ADC except Ashe and Sivir. Right? Every other ADC I've gone at least one, if not multiple pentakills on. Senna I don't have as well because Senna is kind of a support. But since she's here, I'm gonna rank her as well. She probably is the hardest, right? Because you auto attack so slowly to last hit 5 people, very difficult. Caitlyn, I think somewhere in the middle. Of course, something else I didn't actually mention as well that I probably should mention at the start is, to even get a pentakill, it's very likely you are in a very fed state already. Like, even if you're like, let's say a 20 and 0 ADC, right? It's not even that easy to get a pentakill, right? Because you need a situation where all 5 enemies are like at the same place. You need a situation where you last hit all 5 people, and even if you're very fed, these two things don't necessarily always happen, right? So I'm already kind of assuming you're in a position to kind of get a pentakill. So on Vayne, of course, I'm assuming you're not like very far behind it. You can't even kill a single person, right? And same kind of thing for Jinx or Samir or anybody else, right? So you kind of got to be in a pretty dominant position already. I think Caitlyn for now somewhere in the middle. Like, she has range, she can DPS people down, and she can definitely get pentakills, but I definitely wouldn't say she's very easy to get pentakills on. Right, Corki, I think it's kind of even harder than Caitlyn, so I'm going to put him here for now, and as I said, we're going to shift things around as we go along. Now, I think Draven, decent when you get really fed, you kind of do a lot of damage, and definitely if you're a good Draven, I think getting pentakill on Draven is not too difficult. Ezreal, I think really challenging to get pentakills on him. I have gone like at least 2 or 3 pentakills on Ezreal, but I think it's really difficult. You don't do consistent DPS. You do have to kind of burst people down a little bit with your abilities, and of course auto attacking them in between. So overall, not too easy. Now, Jhin also, I think, not too easy, but not as hard as Ashe, right? Because Jhin has that reload mechanic that's very awkward, right? So I have gotten many situations where I'm on a quadra kill with Jhin at least 3 times, and I'm reloading, and someone else kills the last guy, doesn't give me the penta, right? So Jhin, in theory, is a lot like Draven. You do a lot of burst damage when you're fed, but because of his reload mechanic, very difficult unless your teammates kind of give it to you. Okay, Kai'Sa, not too difficult. I'm gonna put it here for now because when you get fed, when you carry, you can just, you know, auto attack people down. Typical hyper carry kind of category, right? So a lot of hyper carry is probably gonna be in the S to A plus tier, but we'll get to that as we go along, right? So Kalista, I think actually pretty decent, pretty decently. I wouldn't say easy, but when you're fed on Kalista, to run people down with your hops is pretty easy, but what's hard is you need to dodge all the crucial abilities when you have low range, right? But if you're good on Kalista, of course, as I said, I'm assuming you have ideal conditions and you're good on the champ, I think Kalista is pretty simple to get a pentakill on. Now, Lucian, is okay. I've gotten many pentas on Lucian just because I play Lucian a lot. But Lucian is a lot like Ezreal, where you're very spell reliant. So you do have a lot of situations where you kind of run out of steam, and you also kind of don't really get the ability to kill people, just because, let's say you use your ulti already, you use your QW and E, and then you only can just auto attack, right? There's not a lot you can really. Of course, your auto attack still do damage or an ADC, but you don't do a lot of significant damage. Now, MF, I think, is a little bit interesting because while you do a lot of burst damage, with your Q. To last hit 5 people, I think it's actually pretty challenging. So I'm kind of between the B and A tier for now. Maybe I'll just put her at the bottom of A plus. Sorry, wait, why is A above A plus? This is weird, right? Let's fix that right away. Anyways, I think that getting a pentakill with MF ulti is even more difficult than just getting pentakill outright, right? Because it's very, very rare that you're gonna get a 5-man ult in the first place, and to get a 5-man ult pentakill is very, very rare. I have seen it before, of course. I have not done it myself, but I've seen it before. I've been a victim of it before. Not very common and not very easy, right? So I think I'll discuss a little bit more when we kind of get to when we kind of rank everything. We can kind of discuss everything as a whole, and I can kind of rearrange. So for now, I'm just tossing people, into the tiers for now. Now let's see Neela. Now Neela, I think, is a very confusing one, because Neela, while you're very likely to be behind just because you're melee, when you actually get to 3 or 4 items, it's actually not that difficult to get pentakill on Neela. The main issue is catching up to people because you're melee, right? Like, you're doing a lot of damage, you're healing a lot, so it's actually not that challenging to get pentakill on Neela. I've gotten, I think, only 1 pentakill on Neela, but I have gotten many quadra kills and very close to getting penta many a time. I actually think that I would personally say she's easier to get penta on than Ezreal and Corki. Jhin definitely has to move up a little bit in terms of ease. Yeah, maybe we'll put her here for now. As I said, later on we'll kind of see. Now Sivir is a little bit kind of tricky to deal with, because personally I think that Sivir is kind of a champion where, since you're in a team fight and you bounce off of people, you actually do quite, I wouldn't say equal damage to the enemy team, right? But you're hitting frontline and backline at the same time, right? So you're actually melting the entire enemy team at the same time. I found that in some games I managed to kill 1 or 2 people, and then in some team fights I get like the quadra kill, and like the last guy ends up dying to one of my teammates, kind of thing, where I feel that actually Sivir is not that difficult to get a pentakill, but it's just that I personally have not yet gotten a pentakill on Sivir. So I'm gonna put her maybe here for now. Right. Tristana, I think, not too difficult. When you get fed, you get resets. It's not that difficult. I think Tristana is relatively easy. Now, Twitch, if you get fed in reality, it's not that hard to get pentakill on Twitch, right? Twitch, in the current meta, kind of sucks, but this is just talking about in general. Assuming, of course, you get fed, assuming optimal conditions, assuming you play the champion well. When you get fed on Twitch, you pop the ulti, you spray and pray through everybody on the enemy team, melt them, pop your E, whatever you gotta do to get a pentakill, right? So not too difficult. Now Varus is an interesting one, because Varus, regardless of which build you go for, I think lethality is probably the most difficult to get pentakill on. But whether you go like AP on hit or crit, those kind of attack speed focused builds, he is sort of a hyper carry in a sense. So it's you can kind of just DPS down people, burst them down, and get pentas on. But at the same time, I don't think it's that easy as well. Now, I think probably when Varus first got reworked and he had that insane AP build, that was the time where I was just killing people very, very easily, right? So I guess when he's really overtuned, it's of course easy. But if you just think about Varus in general, right? He has an ult to catch people out. You can burst people down a little bit with your Q with W empowerment, and then you auto attack a lot, but you don't really have a lot of mobility. So I think it's kind of okay, but not that easy. So maybe I'm gonna put him here for now. And we'll probably have to shift the A tier around a little bit, because it's getting a bit crowded, and I don't know if they're all kind of like as similar as I think they are. Xayah is pretty interesting, because I think how easy it is to get pentakill on Xayah really depends on how the enemy comp is, right? Like against an enemy comp that really runs at you and things like that, it's actually like not that difficult to get the initial few kills, but then to chase down the rest of the enemy team is a different story. So I think I would still say it's easier than these other champions. So I'm gonna put Xayah here for now. Zeri sort of in the hyper carry category as well. Also, like, you can see that hyper carries are generally easier to get pentakills on, because obviously when you're really fat and you're a hyper carry, you do a lot of damage, a lot of DPS, and things like that, right? So Zeri definitely not too difficult to get pentakill on. So now let's take a look at the tier list and let's shift people around, especially the A plus to B tier probably needs some shifting. I still think Ashe is definitely more difficult than these other champions, and Senna as well. So I think the S plus, C, and D tier are fine, but I'm probably gonna move people around elsewhere. Now I do think this S tier champions do belong in the S tier. Maybe needs to shift around in terms of order, something like this. Maybe Kallista's probably a bit harder than the other hyper carries, because you need a lot more skill. For that. Draven, yes, I do think is okay. And then we move to like the Xayah and like all of these other champions, right? So if I'm putting hyper carries like Kai'Sa and Zeri here, I think Xayah is actually a little bit harder to get pentakills on than these carries and a fed Draven. So maybe I'm gonna move Xayah down a little bit. And actually I think Caitlyn moves up a little bit at the minimum. Because Caitlyn, in reality, when you get fed, you can DPS from the backline. Maybe Caitlyn actually moves up because it's sort of, she's sort of similar to hyper carry where you're not as DPS, doing DPS as well as a true hyper carry, but you have that range and you're relatively untouched. You can just auto people down when you're fed and you can get pentakill that way. Xayah probably moves below Sivir at least, because Sivir you can DPS people a lot easier. Whereas with Xayah, you really need people to run at you to get your feathers down. And let's see here. We have these not complicated, but these champions that we gotta think a little bit on. So Xayah versus Varus, I think they're kind of similar. Lucian as well. I mean, they're all kind of a little bit different, right? Because people like Lucian and MF are a lot more by skill I mean like ability dependent. They're a lot more ability dependent than these auto attack based champions. Right? I generally do think ability based champions are harder to get penta on than auto attack based champions, because auto attack based champions you have constant DPS and you can secure last hits easily, whereas with ability based champions it's a lot more difficult. And Jhin is a pseudo ability based champion, because you get that reload where you cannot DPS constantly. So I will leave this area the same. I think this is fair. And Nilah, honestly, does Nilah need to move up? Because honestly, like with the assumption that you're fed, which is a big assumption for Nilah, because most games you will fall behind because of how she's melee. But assuming you're fed and assuming you actually get to your critical item mass, it's actually not that difficult to get pentakill on Nilah. The only thing stopping you is the fact that she's melee and she has to get into melee range. But aside from that, she's not actually that hard to get pentakill on. I feel hesitant to put her, like, bump her up, like, way higher, like, for example, like, A+ tier. Like, I feel that there is a world where she could be here, because in reality, if you guys have actually played Nilah, you will realize when she hits, like, 4 items, for example, she does insane amounts of damage. She has that safety with the W as well, and the ulti, if you catch people with the ulti, engage, and then you start just blasting people with your auto attacks, you can easily melt an entire enemy team, right? So maybe I actually do put her here, yeah, maybe. But then but then at the same time with Sivir, you also kind of had that same kind of effect. So Sivir is actually kind of close to Nilah. Nilah can I put Nilah above Sivir? Like, Nilah does a lot more damage, but it's just a lot harder to pull off, right? But assuming optimal conditions, I think Nilah is actually not that difficult to get a penta. So I'm actually gonna put her up here, right? So Jhin, yeah, it's just the reload mechanic that holds him back. Corki is like, I don't know, Corki just never really seemed very easy to get penta for me. Like, you do a lot of good poke, but when in all-ins, you're decent as well. But I just never felt it was so easy to get penta on Corki. I only have 2 in my lifetime playing Corki. Ezreal definitely does make sense. It's very difficult to get penta on Ezreal. In fact, maybe I even move Ezreal down, right? Because it's not even as easy as these 2 champs. And this kind of maybe makes sense. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, this is how I've decided to kind of split my tier list. So in the S+ tier, you have champions, like, I actually haven't talked about it so much, right? Because I just tossed them in here without really explaining why. So we have Samira, who obviously, when you get your S rank combo, you just dive into the enemy team and you just ult. It's probably the easiest ADC to get a pentakill on. With Vayne, when you get fed, you pop the ulti, you have a lot of mobility, invisibility, and a lot of just damage, whether it's against tanks or squishies. And Vayne is definitely the champion that I got the most pentakills on. I think I have like at least 15 pentakills on Vayne. Like, it's just that kind of 1v9 champion. Jinx, when you get a reset, you just go ham, and it's simple to get a pentakill on her. With Tristana, late game hyper carry does a lot of damage. You get the jump resets to chase people down or to reposition. That's very useful. Twitch, you can attack the entire enemy team at the same time with your ulti and just burst them down when you're ahead. Kalista, you have the hops to run people down, and you have the resets on your Ren to really just kill people. So I think these are, for me, definitively the S+ and S tier are pretty definitive for me. I think these are the 6 easiest pentakill champions. Kalista maybe in terms of skill wise a little bit more difficult, but in terms of kit wise definitely makes sense in my opinion. Now Draven, as I said, if you're very good at Draven, very solid on Draven, I think when you get fed in the game, it's you hit so hard that it's really easy to get penta. And then you have a lot of the hyper carry champions. You have Kaisa, Zeri, and Caitlyn, all of which are sort of similar in the sense that you do a lot of damage, a lot of DPS, and when you get fed, you just need to DPS people down to get the Penta. Right? Then you have Neela, the kind of dark horse here, who, as I said, when you hit your item break points, you're very strong. You deal so much damage, you heal so much, but you just gotta reach the enemy, right? If you can reach the enemy, like in an ideal scenario, right, it's not that hard to get a Penta. Then you have the 3 attack speed champions, which are going to be Sivir, who can basically you just attack the entire enemy team simultaneously with her W. Varus, just a pretty generally strong attack speed champion, can also burst people down by popping his blight stacks. And Xayah, who's a little bit of a wild card because she kind of needs people to run at her for her to be effective, which is why I cannot put her higher than this. Because, I mean, I guess if you assume optimal conditions, it's like 5 melee champions, or not melee champions, but 5 champions is running at you, but realistically that's not really going to happen, right? Like there's no real scenario where that happens. I mean, I guess you could have like I don't know, a tank in the top lane, like a Garen top lane. You could have like I don't know, a Xin Zhao jungle. You could have a Galio mid lane, a Neela bot lane, and like a Alistar support, and they all 5 just run at you, and you just kite them out with your ghost, your ulti, etc., and then you just penta them. But that's not really gonna happen in a real game, right? In a real game, there's probably gonna be like a ranged mid laner, let's say Orianna, and like a ranged ADC, like let's say Caitlyn, and it's really hard for you to deal with them in terms of kills, right? So you have to deal with them last, so not so easy on Xayah, but at the same time not so difficult considering she's an attack speed champion that does constant DPS. Then you have hard-hitting champions like Lucian and MF, who can do a lot of damage, but is reliant on having their abilities up. Without them, it's quite hard for them to secure kills, a lot more difficult. Jhin kind of the same vein as well, but Jhin has that very awkward reload where it takes so long and you just have such a big downtime that it's hard to secure kills, right? On Jhin, I think I've only gotten like 2 or 3 pentas, and I'm like a huge Jhin fan. Jin's my favorite champion. I play Jhin a lot, and it's just really difficult, right? Corki, honestly, Corki is the one I find it hardest to explain because while in theory Corki does have a lot of poke and does decent DPS, I just think that Corki kind of does half poke, half DPS, and when you really try to go all in on a fight, I just think you just don't do as well as attack speed champions, and you just don't do as well as spell-based champions. You neither have the burst of spell-based champions, nor do you have the DPS of attack speed champions. So I think for that reason, it's just a little bit difficult for Corki. Right? And Ezreal, another spellcaster, the only real issue with Ezreal is he can really only hit the person in front of him, and he can't really hit the people behind him. So he really has to go through the front line before he gets to the back line, and he just DPSs mainly through his abilities, of course, through autos as well. And Ashe is, maybe Ashe can actually go higher, I'm not sure, but Ashe is like, I just think she lacks damage, right? At the end of the day, she just has so much utility in her kit that they have to balance it out by reducing her damage, right? And I think for that main reason alone, it's very difficult to get a Penta on Ashe. Like, I've played so many Ashe games, I've never gotten a Penta on Ashe, and I've been close multiple times, don't get me wrong. Like, people have KS my Penta, things like that, whatever. But I just think it's pretty difficult to get Penta on Ashe. Now, Senna is like the same deal with like Jhin and things like that. Like, she auto attacks so slowly that it's very hard to secure the last hit onto like multiple people. I think the highest I've ever gotten on Senna is like a triple kill. I don't even think I've gotten a quadra on Senna. But yeah, this is a pretty interesting video to make, and I hope you guys enjoyed it, like how you guys enjoyed the last few like live ranking videos, or like slash tier lists, I guess. So yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Like, do you agree or disagree, things like that. Thank you guys so much for watching the video, and goodbye.